Welcome to the Time for Littles podcast. I'm Bruce C.E. Fleming, director of the Eden Schoolhouse Network. Our website is edenschoolhouse.com. That's edenschoolhouse.com. And on this episode, we have a special guest. Her name is Heidi Buschbach. Welcome, Heidi.
Hello, Bruce. It's so great to be here with you.
Heidi is a Charlotte Mason educator and a very accomplished homeschooler. And we're delighted to spend these moments together as we consider how God loves all the littles in our lives. We love to talk about ways we can help them grow in the Lord and in the wisdom and life skills they will be needing in the years ahead. I've got a bio that Heidi helped me put together here, and it's about 10 pages long, but I won't, I'll read, let me just read part of it. This is fun. Heidi Buschbach has been homeschooling, listen, homeschooling her four children with Charlotte Mason's methods since 2009. She loves gardening, music, nature walks, and mentoring disadvantaged teens and single moms. Did I say teams? Teens, disadvantaged teens and single moms. After being inspired by a Charlotte Mason mentor herself, Heidi started the Spread the Feast, a CM community co-op for families in the Twin Cities. The co-op has been flourishing for 15 years. It's been a joy to learn and grow with the children as they teach Solfa, Shakespeare, Plutarch, science, geography, and much more. She has a particular interest in researching Charlotte Mason's methods for implementing music education. She has led rec center camps with her church, written lessons for the Alvieri homeschool curriculum, and in 2017 launched a CM music website entitled Miss Mason's Music. That's missmasonsmusic.com. So there's lots more on that bio, but we'll get to that. I just want to welcome you today, Heidi. How you doing?
Good. I'm
Oh,
great, and it's so fun to be here with you.
how are your four kids? What are they up to these days?
They are good. My oldest is graduating in May with her elementary education degree from Covenant College in Georgia. So she's student teaching in a kindergarten right now, actually, and having a lot of fun doing that.
Great.
And then my next oldest is 18. She's graduating from high school this year, homeschooling. And then my son is in 10th grade, and my youngest daughter is in 8th. So she'll be starting high school next year. So
Wow.
I'm getting to the end,
Yeah.
kind of.
So when
Two
you
little,
when we mentioned Spread the Feast, is that the name of the co-op that you took me to that day over in St. Paul? Is
yes, it is.
Yeah, I was really impressed with all the kids, all the parents, uh, the senior high kids as they gave book reports, and the younger kids as they did science, and they had kettle moraines and the drainage pattern from the Rocky Mountains and all
Hmm.
all the different things they were doing. And then you have a hillside outside that location where they go out and do nature walks and things
Hmm.
along that line. Can you give us a little summary of what's a curriculum like in a Charlotte Mason co-op that meets once a week, for example, like that one?
Yeah. Well, a lot of co-ops do a lot of different things. The people that I'm most familiar with generally focus on a lot of the fine arts and nature study because I think for a lot of moms who maybe were educated in the public school system, they might feel less confident on how to teach music or you can't do folk dancing very easily with just four kids at home. So in the past, we always used to do singing and art and folk dancing and nature. But then we started to realize that in our case, when we wanted to meet weekly, we didn't want to take all of the beautiful fine art subjects away from the rest of the week. So we actually cut some of those out and started doing more academic subjects together each week. So this, in our case, we would have the kids do their reading, science reading at home, but then we were doing labs together, or the kids could read and narrate. Narration is Charlotte Mason's term for retelling what they've learned in their own words. So we've done geography, we've done Shakespeare plays, we've read Plutarch's lives, and he wrote great biographies of Roman and Greek citizens and leaders. We've done science experiments for the high school kids and nature hikes for the little ones, and kind of, I mean, almost everything.
Yeah.
So any subject you can think of. But Charlotte Mason loved, she said a liberal education should be for all children. And she just meant by that like a wide, broad, and varied curriculum so that children have relationships with every possible thing that is beautiful in the world. So we try to kind of touch on everything and rotate through different things. We study painters and composers, and so it's pretty beautiful, actually.
What's the class length for, let's say, a second grader? How many minutes per period would you spend?
Um, Probably 10 to 30 minutes, depending on the subject. So she would often do like poetry recitation, and that might only be 10 minutes, or math fact memory work to work on, learning your addition facts or whatever. But typically, on average, an elementary school lesson might be 15 to 20 minutes long.
Hmm.
She was a really big believer in short lessons and changing up the lesson type. So, for example, if you were sitting to do a phonics lesson for 20 minutes, you might want to do music or something that's more artistic following that, just so that the child's brain has an opportunity to rotate from different types of thinking. It's neat because she died right after World War One, but I really think that God gave her insight and wisdom into, she read a lot about the brain and neuroscience, but, of course it was early science. And now we know so much about how children learn and the brain and habit formation. And she just was really like, I think the Lord gave her insight into understanding children. She observed them so carefully. So
There's a
it's
word
neat.
that I used in the introduction. Maybe people need to know what that is. What is the alveary?
Oh, the Alviary is one of many Charlotte Mason curriculums. So she was a British educator. Like I said, she died in 1923, but she was an Anglican woman who just wanted children to learn all these beautiful things. So there's an organization called the Charlotte Mason Institute. There's other organizations that study Charlotte Mason's practices. It actually used to be called Childlight USA. And if people are familiar with Francis Schaeffer, who started the L'Abri ministry in Switzerland, and then there's a L'Abri here in Rochester, his daughter, Susan Schaeffer, she married Reynold Macaulay. They started a L'Abri in England. And that's how she ended up starting an organization called Childlight USA. And she wrote books about Charlotte Mason. And then Childlight eventually, I think, transitioned into the Charlotte Mason Institute. And then in about 2016, 17, they began an actual curriculum where they were providing curriculum that homeschool families and now schools can subscribe to. But there's other really good Charlotte Mason curriculums too, both free and for a fee out there. But that's just one curriculum that is done specifically by the Charlotte Mason Institute.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Let's dip into
Yeah.
one of our important three questions.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your faith story. Did you, Heidi, come to know Christ when you were little, or was it later on?
Oh, well, I was very little. My parents were both grew up in the Methodist church, and then they went to University of Iowa and really got serious about their faith through Campus Crusade. And so I was born in when my mom graduated. She was very pregnant with me when she walked across her graduation stage, and she became a nurse. And so I was raised primarily in the Baptist General Conference, probably for most of my young life, but always, I don't remember a time not knowing the Lord, but I do have a specific memory of a couple things. One, probably like during children's church when I was maybe 5, and them talking about really loving Jesus and accepting him as your personal Lord and Savior, which is a very, Baptist thing to do. And so I remember thinking, being in the basement of my church. So I'm guessing it was children's church. Maybe it was Sunday school, but just thinking, oh, I should do that. But then I also have a distinct memory, probably around age 8, laying in my bedroom. And we still have my old bed. It's an antique bed that I think was handmade by like my great great grandpa or something. But it's one of my daughter sleeps in it now. But I was in that bed, and I remember laying in the dark and actually praying and asking the Lord to be my savior. And then I grew up my mom and dad were speakers at our church camp. I heard your second gal, she shared about working at Trout Lake, and I found out once I moved up here that Trout Lake is the sister camp to Pine Lake in Iowa,
Uh-huh.
and that's where I went, and it was really impactful on my life as a middle school and high schooler, and that I think really was a solidifying thing in my spiritual journey too. But definitely have grown up loving the Lord and feeling blessed that I have parents who love Jesus and always encouraged that for us.
So people say, well, you got to wait till the kids go off to college and makes a decision for themselves, but you miss a whole childhood of enjoying the Lord
Hmm.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were able to pray to him and sing to him and dance to him
Hmm.
and love the Lord all along.
Yes. All of those things, including theater productions and yeah, dancing with records. And now I have my daughter bought a record player at Christmas and we got all my old Salty records.
Uh,
And I used to listen to Salty and dance to Salty. So Salty, the singing songbook, is how I learned to sing parts, I think, actually.
I'm trying to think of the words. Da 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 da. We're on our way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That one I didn't learn until my kids were grown up. We got the
Uh,
old DVDs and going camping now. I'm on the
yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. We had Salty in Africa as missionaries with our little girl. We had Salty, the singing songbook.
Yeah.
There's a lot of curriculum out there that's fun for kids, and that's great. Yeah. Yeah. So I got a question. How did you get from being in that special bed to now having all this experience with Charlotte Mason? Can you fill us in on your ministry story?
Yeah, sure. So I went to Iowa State and I studied music education and some science education. And right before I got engaged, my dad took us to L'Abri in Switzerland. And
Ah,
because I was an educator, I looked at I was thinking, what do I want for my souvenir from Europe? And so I bought Susan Schaefer McCulley's book for the children's sake because it said it was this lovely book about education. And I thought, well, I'm about to get married. I'm going to substitute teach in the fall. I better get a book about education. I had no idea it was about Charlotte Mason.
ah,
And I think I'm slightly dyslexic. I don't know, but I cannot finish books. I am not a good reader. I read, but I just am a slow reader. So that book just sat on my bookshelf and I didn't actually read it. And so when my oldest daughter was 5, I signed up for MACHE, which is the Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators, and I was learning about homeschooling. My husband wanted us to homeschool. He had been around a lot of families homeschooling in his church, and so we kind of set out on that journey. And so I subscribed. MACHE had this little magazine, and my friend Nancy Kelly, she is a Charlotte Mason expert here in Minnesota. She lives down in southern Minnesota, and the only year she ever advertised in that paper mache, which was their magazine, was that year. It was 2009, and there was just a little sidebar that said there's a Charlotte Mason retreat. So I thought, well, who is this lady? And I looked it up, and sure enough, I had that book for the children's sake by Frances Schaeffer's daughter. So I started reading it, and that really introduced me to her ideas and her educational philosophy. And then I went to that retreat that summer. And I've been to that retreat every year except one year when it was full.
wow.
And this summer is the 20th anniversary. So I've been going a long time, I think 16 years. But every year I'm encouraged. It's like church camp for me as an adult. I get to see all my homeschool friends and learn more and more about that. So that really inspired me I just thought, I've got to just try something. I'm going to try a method with my little 5-year-old and see how it goes. And I loved it after the first year, and so we've never turned back. And I mean, that's how I began. But even before she was born, I was substitute teaching when we first got married, and then we had homeschoolers in our church, so I did a homeschool co-op with them, and I was their music teacher then, and I helped. There was a homeschool co-op in that town where we first lived as well, and they had a music class. And so I got to do a music class there. So I was hired as a teacher to do a music class for them as well. So I actually was kind of sorry, my computer is dying. I'm gonna just plug in my cord wasn't plugged in properly, I don't think. Um, but anyway, so we were involved in a homeschool co-op there at our church before my oldest was even born. So I've been kind of teaching kids my whole life really, but
You've mentioned several
then we
times.
started homeschooling.
Yeah, you've mentioned several times local churches. How does that work out to do schooling inside a church building?
Yeah, well, those first churches were just churches that were hosting a homeschool co-op. My kids currently are in another homeschool co-op, and they just rent the church space during the week because otherwise, and that's been the case with the co-op. So I started a Charlotte Mason co-op in 2011, and that one that you were talking about that we've done for 15 years.
Yeah.
We used our church for a while, and now they rent another church that just has a better facility. So it's really a blessing because anytime you have a larger group of children gathered, whether it's just a few families. When we lived in Woodbury, we did our co-op there at Woodbury Community Church for a while, and they're actually hosting Laurel Community now, which is
Oh,
a micro school I helped start in 2021. But they were hosting us for a while when we lived in Woodbury, and it's just so great because it's this huge space that's otherwise sitting empty during the week. A lot of times, if churches don't have a preschool or other programming, it's a large, sometimes wasted space. And so it's been such a blessing. We've had really great churches being willing to either let us use their building for free or at a very, very reduced cost. And then we get to host our school co-op, which is just once a week. But in the case of Laurel, I think they're 5 days a week now, which is really neat.
5 days a week. Now, you tipped us off to Emmaus Road Reformed Church too, which is now in Edina.
Hmm.
And we went over and wonderful people, a lovely sanctuary. They've got an organ and they've got, music and they've got a special music room and beautiful classrooms. And they said, yeah, why don't you, with this concept that you're talking about of a micro school, can you describe or should we talk about that? We wondered about the possibility if we were going to start more schools, how would we do that? Now, Joy and I were involved a number of years ago in starting a private Christian high school, and the only model I had at the time to think of was a public school. So we designed
Right.
it to look like a public school, and ta-da, it looks like a public school. Uh, but now, well, we've had several models. We've had charter schools pop up, and we know what that's kind of like. We've had homeschools busy going, and now there's these micro schools that are popping up. And so, as Joy and I were considering the possibility of starting a K through 12, but starting with a K through 5, I thought maybe we could use multiple campuses. And so
Hmm.
that would be multiple churches. Some churches seem to get the idea and get on board right away, and some churches don't. Why do you think that is?
I, based on some of the people I've spoken to, I think some of it probably depends on whether a school thinks that they are going to have a responsibility to run the school. I think a lot of churches probably feel overworked and understaffed, or, the saying of like 20% of the people do 80% of the work. I think
Yeah.
that's always true.
Mhm.
So, um, so I think the idea of having passionate people who want to start schools, but having a partnership with the churches is better than asking a church to start a school, because that is another big work that really takes a lot of responsibility.
Mhm.
But I think some buildings worry about insurance. What would it be like to have children in the space? Some buildings actually aren't even zoned properly to have a school in them. And so I think when people don't know what all the regulations are, that's a little scary for some leadership as well.
Yeah.
So I've thought a lot about it for quite a few years because I kind of would like to start an inner city micro school with Charlotte Mason. And I do think that maybe the responsibility has to be on the school starters, founders, to do some of that legwork. Like what is the St. I live in St. Paul. What is the St. Paul fire regulations? And so then what churches could I even use for a school? Because the kids can't be trapped in a basement without proper exits. Or, so I'm thinking like maybe if some of that legwork was done and then there was this model where all the administrative piece was really taken care of well, then you've kind of got a package where you can say, this is what we already know what to do. We just need to use your space. And we would love, I would love to see like elderly people, retired couples, single people, or even moms who've homeschooled to say, maybe I can't work at your school full time, but I could be a math specialist, or I could volunteer, or I could take the kids on a field trip, or I just feel like there's ways churches could partner without having to do all the managerial work of a school.
Yeah.
But it would just be so great if churches could open up their space at a reduced cost, like even the rent, it's reusing space. And so if rent was really cheap, that would allow me to have an inner city school in a church, and the church wouldn't have to do anything, but giving me cheap rent would allow me to give really low tuition to families who don't have a lot of money.
Mhm.
So I've thought a lot about that. Just like, what if the churches just partnered that way financially or
Yeah.
helped me hire a couple teachers?
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
I think there's like the sky's the limit as far as dreaming of ways churches might be able to partner.
Hmm.
But
Somebody said to me the other day that they like the idea of we were talking about starting Eden family schoolhouses several years together with one teacher and several years together in the next room, and then a third, full-time teacher working with those. And they said, in the day when we had larger families, everybody had older kids that mentored the younger kids. And this
right.
idea of several grades together, is that a helpful thing? You've seen it work?
Yeah, so our co-op is based on that model because that's actually what Charlotte Mason did. So she called them forms, and the forms were, she thought younger children shouldn't be in formal schooling. But this whole book, this is called Home Education. It's her first book, but she wrote six. They're big, like 400, 300, 400 pages long. This is about educating kids birth to age 9. So she didn't think that young little children shouldn't be learning.
What was the name of that book again?
It's called Home Education
Home
by Charlotte
Education,
Mason.
Training and Educating Children Under Nine. Volume one, Charlotte Mason.
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yep. And it's based on talks she gave at her church to help her church do a fundraising event. She didn't have money to give, so she offered to give talks to parents, and then the
Oh,
money came into her church through that, which is neat. That when she was a single woman and didn't have money, so she gave her time, which is beautiful. But this book was developed from those talks. And so it talks a lot about taking small children out on walks, learning how to read and sounding out, playing with letter tiles to learn how to sound their letters out. So through play and through real life experience is how she encouraged small children to be educated before they should start formal schooling at age 6. But
and you mentioned
she
a
had,
technique called narration. How does that work?
yeah. Let me answer your question first about the
Okay.
forms you had asked
Oh,
about. So
yep.
basically, the forms were first through third grade, which is 3 grades, and then fourth through sixth grade was Form 2. And that's how we ran our co-op. And so whenever we would do say a geography lesson, we would have the fourth through the sixth graders all together typically. And so Form 2 would be together and they would do that level of geography. And it works fine. And we had up to 40 to 45 kids in our co-op some years. So it was like a
Oh,
micro school size
yeah.
where we had 10 families and maybe 35, 40 kids. So each form probably had 10 children because we had babies in the nursery all the way up to seniors in high school. And so it worked really well to have about 10 to 12 kids in each form and to do those subjects together in a combined grade. And then sometimes during the school day, when our co-op, then we would gather all together to go out on a nature hike or to do our singing. And so those were times when the older kids did get to help with the little kids. I think the detriment in a paid school environment is there will be parents who say, well, I'm paying a lot of money to send my eighth grader to school. they may not, if they don't have the vision of helping their child mature through mentoring a younger child, they might feel like they're wasting their money. There are going to be families who say, it's all about academics and I'm paying for this. But I think a school, if you educate families on what your school cares about,
Yeah.
then the older children can. To answer your question about narration, narration was the primary method of learning that Charlotte Mason used in her schools. It is just retelling. The child would retell what they learn in their own words. So, for a history story, she always wanted children to read what she called living books instead of twaddle. Twaddle was her kind of funny made up word for stupid, dumbed down books or easy reads that are just for entertainment. So, Pilgrim's Progress would be, or the Bible would be good examples of a living book. They contain living ideas, spiritual ideas, not always spiritual, but true ideas
Hmm.
that kids can think about. And she would just ask them, they would only get to read it once. And so she developed a very good habit of paying attention. My college daughter thanks me to this day. Mom, I'm so glad you narrated. We narrated because she learned how to pay careful attention when she read things or listened to her college lectures. So she didn't have to take a lot of notes or study a lot for tests because she would narrate or retell what she learned to herself in her imagination or in her mind. And she remembered so much better because she had been paying attention. So small children at age 6, if you read a Bible story like the parable of the lost sheep, for example, we would just read that and then you say to a child, can you tell me back what happened? Or tell me about what Jesus did. And you don't ask comprehension questions. You let them engage their own spirit with the idea in the scriptures or in the history story or in a painting, a picture by a famous painter or a composer piece, we might say, what did you hear in that beautiful piece of music? So they could even talk about what they heard in art or music. But in a story of the parable of the lost sheep, they might use the Bible language and tell the whole story.
Hmm.
And then it really becomes their own because they've had to think about the ideas, formulate it, and then, be able to retell in a narrative style in their own words. And so those sorts of actions, she's like, that's how we actually come to know things. She called it the act of knowing, I think. And it is really different than just having to fill out a worksheet. Like, what did Jesus go do? He went to go find the lost sheep. You know, it's very different. So,
The world becomes their own, and they recreate the world for you. I remember you taught me this method, and I came home and did it to my grand twins, and and I said, "Okay, girls, we're gonna do something new," and I forget what I actually taught them, but they each came. I said, "I want you to act it out too."
yeah,
And we had a
that's
wonderful
good.
time. It was I was waiting for their parents to come. We were babysitting, and we had a great time in the living room. As you know, first the one, and they're twins, and then the other, and they presented the whole thing back to me. It was a great experience. Yeah,
hmm
yeah.
And usually they do a better job than I can do. Like, I haven't been trained in the habit of careful attention. So, I mean, I remember reading an Abraham Lincoln biography with my kids when they were in upper elementary, and they could go on and on and on. And I think we did an exam question on it once, and it was just, please tell me everything you remember from the Abraham Lincoln book at
Oh,
the end of 12 weeks. And I audio recorded it because I couldn't keep up typing. I was going to transcribe what they orally told me, and I think it was like 12 minutes long. And I just thought, after 12 weeks, they remember all of this
yeah,
stuff. And,
yeah,
I thought, was that really in the story? Because I couldn't remember.
yeah.
So, but it was. So it's really great. And I loved that your first two guests. It was beautiful. They didn't know they were doing this, but your first interview, he helped
John
you start
Newton. Yeah,
Southwest,
yeah.
yes. And he talked about that children are persons, and that's Charlotte Mason's first principle is children are born persons. And just the you even he talked about you were talking about having school, like in the church, as Sunday school. But what I loved, he picked up on was that a lot of times Sunday schools end up lecturing at children.
Yeah.
And what he drew out was no, we have to respect the personhood of the child, that they actually know and notice and discover all these things. So he didn't know it, but we do as Christians intuitively know Charlotte Mason's methods. And he laid it out so beautifully that we need to let the children kind of discover for themselves, really, the truths from God's word and the truths instead of trying to shove it all in their brain. And then your second
Pastor Heather.
gal,
Hmm.
yes. So she talked about what she wanted for kids once they were in middle school was um, that they had all of this base knowledge of the scripture so that she could apply it. Because when kids are little, they go from concrete to abstract, and so when the middle schoolers are getting to her, they start wanting to think about, well, what does it mean? And and she talked about respecting them as people too. She brought up the personhood as well. But what I thought was neat about that was the concrete to abstract is something else Charlotte Mason does, where instead of getting a science textbook, for example, and reading about the life cycle of a butterfly, which in a book written down is very abstract. That's hard for a 6 or 7 year old to imagine. But instead, you should go out in nature and you should watch the butterflies and you should collect a flower and study it. And Charlotte Mason would have children keep nature journals. And she just really, same thing with history. They would study their local history, even their regional or county history, before they studied ancient history or
Yeah.
history around the world, because a 6 year old doesn't know how long ago. One of my students, he was a 5 year old at Laurel Community School the year I was there, and he said, "Oh, I bet Abraham Lincoln knew Jesus," because they just don't understand
Yeah.
time yet, so timelines are really abstract for children. Even math numbers, like a written number 5, is more abstract than playing with beans, counting beans, dividing beans or buttons or something. So that was neat too, that she made, another from working with teens and kids for 30 years that we do when we really see children and watch them carefully, that is what we learn, is that that's what they need. They need to touch. And so I had this behind my head. It looked so funny. I took it down, but this is a wasp's nest that we collected.
Wow.
And I keep all these nature things in my schoolroom. I'm up here in my attic with my school books and stuff, but we collect all these things and it's just so beautiful. Like wasps chew up leaves in their mouth and spit this out. And so I don't know if you can see this, but there's beautiful stripes of different colors. And I
Yeah.
think it's just from all the different colors of the leaves that they chew up in the fall.
That's
And
interesting.
so it's like a piece of art,
Yeah.
and children need to see and touch and
Now, if
hold
people are just
that.
listening to the audio version of this podcast, they're not going to see that.
Yeah.
But
No.
I'm going to encourage them to go to our True 316 Foundation YouTube channel,
YouTube.
and we'll have
Yeah.
you up there, and they'll be able to see that. I got a question. Are the size, was it 6 or 8 sides to a cell, and are they the same as a bee's nest, or are the wasps
I
different?
think that they are both the same. It's 6.
Six.
It's a hexagon. Yeah. So if you can't see, you should go
Yeah.
look it up on the internet and
Yeah.
look up
Yeah.
the
Are they
inside. I
neat?
mean, this is one of the kinds that hangs, is a huge,
Yeah.
huge thing in the tree, and this is just a portion of it. But that's what the inside looks like. You can't tell that unless it's broken open.
Yeah.
The top is just flat, see?
Yeah. But that's
But
fascinating. Sure.
oh, now I'm getting dirt all over my computer.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
It's
What
shaking all over.
One of the fun things I like to do with my own kids, myself, I did it too, is a 10-minute look. I'll take them into the edge of
Yeah.
the forest and I'll say, okay, let's tell me everything you see. Now we'll wait
Hmm.
5 minutes. Now tell me everything you see.
Mm,
And after 5 more minutes, now tell me everything you see. And they'll see a bird and then they'll hear a bird and then they'll say, well, there's a bird over there that's answering this bird. By the time 10 minutes are gone, there's a whole complete world that's opened up, but they have to learn to
yeah.
observe, you know.
Yeah.
We have to encourage them to stand still a little bit,
Hmm.
take a look.
Yeah, and in the book that I showed you, the home education book, she talks about that. And she talks about the mother. taking time to go outside and do these walks or to take the baby and like do school outside on the blanket. And she does the same thing that you just described, Bruce. And it's the mother, I think, in the story says, "Is that all you saw? Go
Uh,
back and look again."
uh,
And goes, "Tell me if you can see anything else." And, for parents who maybe feel uncomfortable. I mean, there's moms I know that I do, and I love insects. I think they're phenomenal and very interesting. And but I have parents and kids who get really scared and squeamish around insects. And so even just the idea of laying on a blanket with your baby in the grass makes some people kind of grossed out, I think, and it's too bad. So I just love the way that she puts it, and in her book, she encourages, moms to go out there with them and try to see how much they can see and how much do they notice. And that is training them in the habit of attention because it forces them to slow down. And I think especially with devices and TVs and screens these days, there's so many really fast-paced images popping before our children's eyes that they almost don't have the attention span to slow down and notice. And so today I had nature class at my co-op. I teach, it's a non-Charlotte Mason co-op, but they hired me to be the nature teacher for two elementary classes. So we went outside today to look at the birds, but there were no birds at the bird feeder. So we found moss, and the kids started to collect little pieces of moss to observe, and we painted them in our nature journals. And it was just so fun to watch them because there were four or five or six different types of moss. And so I had to model at first they were very disinterested. And the first class was kindergarten through third grade. And so finally, what I said was, "Oh, there's two different kinds." And, so I
yeah,
already knew there were two different kinds, but I
yeah, but
just was like very excited. And they
yeah.
came running over and they're like, "They're different?" And I said, "I wonder how many different finds you can, or types of moss you can find." And then it was just like, "I found another one. I
Uh,
found another
uh,
one." It's
uh,
a class of ten kids and little boys and girls. And at first the boys were climbing the trees and not looking, but once it was a contest,
yeah.
they were so excited. And so we bought in all these big lumps of moss and a big log that had like a slime mold on it and lichen. And they said, "There's moss on the tree log too." And we kind of made a muddy mess of the classroom in the church, but that's also at a church in Stillwater. And we rent that space. And so we have to be good stewards and clean up our mud and that sort of thing. But that was a lot of fun. So kids can, so then the big girls who were fourth through seventh graders, "Well, I wonder what these little hairs are on the moss, and it's red, and mine is smoking," because they have spores like mushrooms and ferns. And
Yeah.
so the spores actually were fluffing out. And so it
Oh,
looked like smoke coming out of the
yeah.
top. And so they noticed all of that. And this one has different leaves than the others. And yeah, so they're very observant if you give them the opportunity.
Reminds me of the hymn I learned growing up. This is my father's
Yeah.
world. And
Yeah.
yeah, and you learn more and more. Well,
Hmm.
I want to sit in your classroom as soon as I get a chance. That's what I want. I want our people who are spending our time for littles right now to understand. Kids are
Hmm.
great, and and there are great teachers like Heidi
Hmm.
Buschbach and John Newton and Heather Fleece and so many more. And that's one of the reasons why we like to do this podcast, the Time for Littles podcast. Well, we're going to stop for now, but thank you so much, Heidi. We really appreciate your time and your heart and all the work you've put in on this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's
All right.
great to be here.
Thanks.